This is part 4 of the content on Chapter 5 related to attributions, and this is on culture and causal attributions. So much of what psychologists know, what we know about human behavior is universal and applies to all humans. Like our brains work the same, and many of our reactions are the same, our emotional systems, the way we interpret emotions. There are many things that are common or universal, but things like the fundamental attribution error may be affected by culture. So Westerners tend to define themselves in terms of their relationships with others less often than other people do throughout the world. This is sort of an individualist perspective. And Westerners tend to think of themselves more in the context of personal goals, attributes, and preferences than the other people in the world. So when we say Westerners, often that is implying the dominant culture. So we have many cultures here in this country. And when we say Westerners, typically we mean the European culture in this country, but the same is not true of other cultures within this country. So the individualist nature undoubtedly rubs off on other cultures, but might not necessarily be the same as it is for the individualist cultures. And so the Westerners that we refer to, this individualistic culture tends to be most dominant in the United States and in Australia. Non-Westerners define themselves more in terms of the social roles they occupy, and think about themselves more in the context of their obligations to other people and to institutions than Westerners. And so you can see this play out, like, for example, how quickly many people in our country changed jobs. The same would not be true in some place like Korea, where I was visiting this summer. People would tend to stay with their jobs for a very long time and feel an obligation to that institution that employed them. And the dedication, the first thought that would occur to them would be about other people, not so much about themselves. And even ideas like it would be a courtesy in Korea, where my son had been living, it would be a courtesy if you were feeling depressed to still put on a happy face for the benefit of others so that they wouldn't worry. And there are a lot of examples I could give you from my trip this summer. And so then that's when those differences coming back to the United States become really strong and present. So since we have such differences, Asians in particular and Westerners, we attend differently to context. So in other words, Asian people tend to be more aware of the situation, more aware of others. So it shouldn't surprise us to learn that Asians are more inclined than Westerners to attribute behavior of others to the situation and not to a dispositional trait. So Westerners attend to dispositions and internal causes, whereas Asians attend to situations and contexts. So that means that this error, the fundamental attribution error, is more widespread and pronounced for Westerners than for Asians. We Westerners tend to pay little attention to situational factors and circumstances, where Asians pay a lot of attention to them and grant their influence. So what about people who are connected to both independent and interdependent cultures? In those cases, attribution styles may change depending on the cultural context. So we can think of people living here, Asian people living in the United States. What's going to happen to my daughter-in-law, Sua, as a Korean woman raised in Korea who's now living in the United States? Will she develop different attribution styles? Or we have many people from Mexico and Central America, which tend to be more interdependent cultures or collectivist cultures than we are. What happens to them here in the US? And so we have some evidence from Hong Kong. Hong Kong is a nation that's really heavily influenced by China. In fact, now they're under the purview of China. But they were under Western countries, in particular Britain. The United Kingdom also has a very heavy influence. And so citizens of Hong Kong have to navigate two cultures. So what happens? Well, these residents get very flexible and they can switch between independent and interdependent attribution styles. So when they're primed with images, or when their identity as a Westerner is activated, they tend to make more dispositional attributions and blame permanent enduring traits for behaviors. And when they're primed with images related to their Chinese culture, they tend to make more situational attributions, saying, oh, that person must have been late when he cuts you off in the car. So that's sort of a bifurcation of identity. And I think of many of you also needing to navigate two situations, but I don't know what your primary situation is. So I wonder, are Navajo people less susceptible to fundamental attribution error? Because I don't know if the Navajo Nation would consider itself independent or interdependent, or how that would be, and whether that experience for some of you is to have to navigate two cultures in terms of attribution styles. So by way about this, I'm going to show you a short video. It's a 30-minute video. I'll be linking it. I can't embed it in these slides. But before you watch it, I'd like you to keep moving forward, but stop the video at each question so that you can write your answers down before you watch the video. This will give you a little insight into yourself. First off, how would you yourself explain the behavior of this fish who's outside of the rest of the fish? Just explain it. What's the fish up to? Why is he going this way when they're all going that way? Pause if you need more time. Otherwise, come here and imagine that you are hosting a party and you have a lot of beverages that your guests can enjoy. What words might you say to offer a drink? What are you going to say when someone comes in the door? And finally, answer the question, who are you? Write just 5 statements that complete the phrase, I am. I am, how would you finish the phrase? And once you're done with that, go ahead to the video. This is it. I won't be playing it here. You'll find it interesting. And the very last slide here presumes that you've watched the video. And now that you've written your answers down, you can think about these. How did your responses to these questions compare with the responses produced in the video? So how did you explain the fish's behavior? I'm not going to elaborate. You'll have to look at this. Did you offer a drink that offered free choice, or observe the individual to see what was needed? Did you blame the person or the situation for the murder? Did you answer the who are you question with your roles or your characteristics? And so then what would you conclude about your own tendency for independence versus interdependence? So this is a fun little activity to end our content on culture and attributions. Thanks, and see you in the next lecture.